tendencies of different strategies or something, right? Or different behaviors. They'll change over time, no matter what, as long as you have a finite population. And they change due to chance processes like drift, which can occur in genetic and cultural evolution, and environmental catastrophes that wipe out populations, and their population getting wiped out. You know, them getting wiped out doesn't have to do with the behavior in question. There's no correlation, right? And also there can be change due to selection processes. And whether we're talking about natural selection of particular genetic variants that affect the phenotype, or selection processes that occur in cultural evolution, because the transmission of ideas is biased in non-trivial ways. And those tendencies for us to transmit information to particular people and listen to what other particular people are saying are themselves shaped by natural selection. Some have argued. Okay, so the main thing is I'm not coming up with a genetically deterministic explanation for why people remit. I'm just saying that our cognitive tendencies, our psychology is affected by biology. Our biology is affected by evolution. I'm not sure. So what this gets at is what I'm really interested in, is remittance behavior at all adaptive? And by that I mean, is it a means of maximizing one's inclusive fitness, which is one's fitness plus the fitness of everybody they interact with, weighted by how related they are to those people. Okay? So you might criticize my application of this adaptive framework for understanding remittances. And I would say, you're probably right to criticize me. One reason why you might criticize me is because recent rapid cultural changes lead, potentially, to maladaptive behavior. And there have been some recent rapid cultural changes that themselves explain why migrants and remittances behave in the way they do today, right? So you couldn't send money from Florida to Haiti like that using your cell phone in, you know, the year 2000 BC, right? Can anybody come up with another critique of applying evolutionary theory in general, or an adaptive framework especially, to remittance behavior? I'll give you a hint. It occurs in biological evolution, strictly biological evolution, if we're talking about, you know, what species have wings and what don't. Okay? Bats have wings, and birds have wings.
We're talking about convergent evolution.
Yes, convergent evolution. And why does convergent evolution, what's the opposite of convergent evolution? Huh?
Yeah.
Homoplazy. Shared traits, shared derived traits. We share behavioral characteristics simply because we derived them earlier, not because we derived them independently to solve some adaptive problem. Okay, so there's phylogenetic inertia which is occurring, maybe. And actually it interacts with this problem too, because, right, I could just possess a behavioral trait not because it's adaptive. It can in fact be maladaptive, but there's adaptive lag. Okay, so those are two critiques you could level at me. And I'll say, you're right, but let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. What we need to do is we need to assess the extent to which we can apply an adaptive paradigm to remittance behavior. And to do that, we need to think about, okay, how flexible is human behavior? Do we expect human behavior to be? Okay? And that would be called the phenotypic plasticity of human behavior. And then how does that phenotypic plasticity intersect with the adaptive challenges of the remittance economy? So you'd expect, if everybody was perfect inclusive fitness maximizer, they would behave in a certain way in the remittance economy. Okay? And if they weren't, they would behave in a different way. Okay? All right. So the intersection of these two sets, if this is a Venn diagram, anybody taken like a basic statistics class? You'll learn probability theory, and you guys will write these write down these Venn diagrams, and it's just, anyways, yeah, trust me. And it's silly. So the intersection between these two sets is going to be a function of the similarity of the remittance economy currently to previous environments of adaptive relevance, right? And so, how are we gonna test to what extent remittance behavior is adaptive? And how are we gonna test what factors might affect how adaptive remittance behavior is? Okay? Just come up with a silly idea about how we would do that. I don't know, somebody just fire something out. How would you figure out how adaptive remittance behavior is? Given that you can't observe evolution happening in humans, because we reproduce very slowly.
Then you employ on something that produces much faster.
What's that?
Employ on something that produces much faster. They don't have the same
Yeah, you could do that.
behavior abilities.
You could. And there are people in the biology department that are testing predictions of social evolution in bacteria. I'm unfortunately not doing that because I'm not smart enough. But another thing that you could do is you could come up with a model for how you would expect people to behave if they're inclusive fitness maximizers. And then you test it against data, okay, on people's behavior. Not necessarily their actual fitness. You don't estimate the selection gradient of a certain remittance behavior. You just estimate the fit of the models of the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to estimate, I'm not doing it in this talk, I'm doing it for my dissertation, sorry. You're going to estimate the effect of remittances on some currency that would be relevant to fitness, preferably throughout our evolutionary history. Okay? Step 2, derive optimality and game theory models. Let's just cut out the game theory. Not everybody here is familiar with game theory probably. But you derive the models that you would expect if people are behaving in the remittance economy in an optimal way, if they were fitness maximizers. Step 3, obtain relevant cross-cultural data. Step 4, assess how the models fit, these models that you derived in step 2, fit given the relationship that you estimated in step 1 in different social contexts. Then you compare the models across different contexts. So what currency should we use? What currencies have been important throughout our evolutionary history? Food. Yeah. Oh, I'm hungry. Thirsty. I want some water. Yeah, access to food. What else? Shelter. There you go. Yeah. See? Nutrition and shelter. Nutrition and shelter, no question. Access to adequate nutrition and shelter affects positively survival of anybody. But mainly, it's going to affect the survival of the young in humans. Survival definitely affects fitness, right? There's weaker evidence that survival, or the access to adequate nutrition and shelter, affects fertility. Okay? Some of you who were in the biodemography class know that relationship is not necessarily clear-cut. Fertility positively affects your fitness. For a moment, I'm going to put this other little bubble here called marriage prospects or mating prospects. Okay, you can't conceive if you're human, unless you have sex. You can't have sex unless somebody wants to have sex with you. So that's a conundrum. Luckily, I've solved it. But so that bubble will become important when we talk about remittances. So where should remittances fit into this causal framework? Remittances might affect, to varying extents in different populations, access to adequate nutrition and shelter. It could also affect, indirectly, because you're providing somebody else with adequate nutrition and shelter, because you're giving them remittances, your marriage prospects. So it could affect both your fertility and the survival of people you care about, and that affect your indirect reproductive value, or the contribution, the genetic contribution to future generations.